go back and watch the video I made, and I think the title of it is The Bedford Pie Safes. And you can get a brief history of what a Bedford Pie Safe is. And then there's a video right after that. I think it's called The Rest of the Story. And between those two videos, you'll understand why, one of the reasons why I have a immense interest in Bedford Pie Safes. And that was probably in 1998 that I first heard that term, Bedford Pie Safe, and first was described to me what a Bedford Pie Safe was, why they were significant, and why they were highly sought after by antique dealers in the area. And most of the antique dealers in the area at that time, they knew, I say most of them, probably all of them, all the people that were actually antique dealers and interested in buying and selling antiques and antique furniture, they knew about the Bedford Pie Safes. They were always on the lookout for one, and they were always willing to pay well for one. That's not true anymore. The guy who originally told me about him, legend as far as antique dealers is concerned, Doug Jenkins, he's from Orange County. He runs a place called the Orange County Country Store. Has bought and sold antiques since he was a boy in high school. He's the one that told me about them, and since then I had discussions with him, both with Patsy Faust, who ran an antique shop called the Union Mule. Before that she had one in Owensburg, Indiana called, I think it was the Gingerbread House, but I'm not sure about that. And then there was a man in Mitchell, he ran an antique shop called Log Cabin Antiques. His name was Everett Green, and I had some discussions with him about Bedford Pie Safes. Also Richard Day, who ran a business in Paoli called Yesterday's Antiques. He and his wife Margie. Richard told me a great deal about Bedford Pie Safes, and there's a story in the original video I made about them, about Richard's brother-in-law, and his name was Tom Poling. He was from down in the Jasper area, and he of course knew about Bedford Pie Safes. If you watch that video, you'll find out he bought one down in Lawrence County near here in Indiana. Bedford Pie Safes. And in the last couple of months, maybe 3 months, I've had some experiences that have led me to learn a whole lot more about Bedford Pie Safes, and some of them were just astonishing. There is a district, a historic district in Bedford, Indiana. It begins in the vicinity of the Bedford downtown square, the courthouse, and runs south from there, I think along maybe J Street as the western boundary, and possibly G Street or in that area as the eastern boundary. And I don't know how far south it goes, but that area is a historic district called the Zahn, Z-A-H-N, Historic District. It's registered with whoever you register historic districts with in the state of Indiana, and there are plaques in that area at various locations informing you that this property is part of the Zahn Historic District, and it is a registered property in that district. And so that's where today's story begins. Well, that's one of the features of today's story is the Zahn Historic District. So if you don't know anything about that, look that up online and find out what you can about the Zahn Historic District and about a man named John Zahn and why he was significant or important to Lawrence County history, Bedford, Indiana history, and how this district came to be named for him. While I'm at it, I'll just go ahead with a little more history. There is a lady, she's still living as of today. She's quite elderly, and sometimes she's quite lucid, and other times she's not so lucid. She resides in a local nursing home. Her name, I believe her name is Margaret Stipp, S-T-I-P-P. And she is a direct descendant of John Zahn. I think possibly he was her grandfather. He was either her grandfather or her great-grandfather. And she, until recently, owned 2 houses that were in the Zahn Historic District, possibly 3. In fact, she was raised in one of the houses, and she raised her children in one of the houses. So that's another key part of this story. Margaret Stipp, possibly Mary Margaret Stipp, I'm not sure. I think they call her by 2 names. She's a part of the story, and her children, some of her children are part of the story. And then there's the squirrel. And if you don't know who the squirrel is, her real name is Sharon Mosier. And she goes by other names too. Some people call her Sweet Cheeks, and I don't know, there's some flattering, some unflattering names that she's called around different circles. But I nicknamed her the squirrel. If you want to know more about her, go find a video I made about her. It's got something about the squirrel in the title of it. She appears and is influential in 2 or 3 other of my videos, because since I made her acquaintance in life, she has a way of just getting into everything, and she's gotten into a lot of the details of my life. And she's right in the middle of this story, and the reason is she had been to my home, seen what I'm going to call my pie safe, but my wife refers to it as Grandma Betty's pie safe. It's her pie safe now. She does that out of fear that, in spite of the fact that I don't think it would ever happen, she calls it Grandma Betty's pie safe to keep me from selling it in case somebody wanted to buy it and was willing to pay a price that I couldn't resist. That's not my pie safe. It's Grandma Betty's pie safe. Used to be Aunt Colleen's pie safe. But Squirrel had heard the story of Bedford Pie Safes from me, and she had seen our pie safe. She knew or had heard of Bedford Pie Safes and had seen one, so she knew what they looked like. Well, since the time that I made the video about her when she worked at the White River Arts and Crafts, or White River Arts and Antique Store, whatever that mall is down there that Steve Wolfenberger owns and operates. I used to have a booth in there, and Sharon used to work in there. And we became friends through our relationship in there. And she was a person who had attributes that I admired, and one day I just decided to make a video about it and talk about her and some other people who had the same kind of attributes that I'd known in Bedford, Indiana and other places throughout my lifetime. And so I did that. I made this video about her, and I told the story about how I called her a squirrel. And since then she's been involved. She was involved, in fact appears in the video called Last Cowboy Song. You could learn more about Sharon and see Sharon actually, the image of Sharon in that video, The Last Cowboy Song. But I digress. Let's get back to this. Bedford Pie Safes. And my desire, my curiosity, my pursuit of more information about Bedford Pie Safes and who built them and when they were built. And so Sharon, or the squirrel, she has gone from an employee of the antique mall to a self-employed businesswoman, And one of the things that she does is she cleans houses, cleans buildings. She does all kinds of work like that. And her husband, he has a regular job down at Mitchell as well, but he gets involved too in some of her work by doing jobs around properties like mowing and cleaning up brush and straightening up dilapidated buildings and hauling off trash and that kind of thing that Sharon gets involved with as a result of some of her cleaning jobs. And she got involved with one of Mrs. Stipp's children, or more than one of her children, in her role as a person who could clean up and organize things, because they owned houses in the Zion Historic District, and they either were in the process of selling one or getting it ready to sell, and they needed some help getting a place that had been sat empty for a lot of years, and they hired Sharon to help her clean up this place. She got in there, and one of the first things that she did, she walked in this house, a house built in, I think, 1856, right in that neighborhood sometime. 1856, I think, is when the house was built. She walked in this house, through the back door, turned left into another room, and she said, "Oh my God, that's a Bedford Pie Safe." She saw a Bedford Pie Safe. She saw it sitting there against the wall in this old home in the Zion Historic District, and she recognized it as a Bedford Pie Safe, and she told the people that were there, you have a Bedford Pie Safe. Of course, they wanted to know what it was, and that's how I got involved in it. She got permission to invite me to come and look at the things in that house, and when I walked in that house, I got goosebumps. I mean, for somebody like me who likes old country furniture, Civil War era antiques and furniture and other artifacts from that era, and old homes that were built in that time frame, and the history of things like that and places like that. I just love that kind of thing. And when I walked in this house and I saw that pie safe, and it was pristine, it was in its original condition, and I believe it was in the home that it was delivered to by the man who built it. It was the right time, the home had the right time frame, and the condition of the pie safe and the neighborhood that I found it in, as it tied into some other things I knew about Bedford Pie Safes. I was looking at a Bedford Pie Safe that had been sitting maybe in that exact location, but for sure in that same home since the mid to late 1850s. And I mean, goosebumps just got all over me when I saw that and realized not only was I looking at a Bedford Pie Safe, I was looking at one that had been sitting in the same home since it was brand new, probably. And it had not been altered. It was original to how it was built by its builder. Woo! That's something. And I got excited about it. And I'd love to own that pie safe. It's not for sale, but if it ever were for sale, I sure would like to own it, because it's just, huh. And this story I'm telling you, it could end right there and be just a fantastic story. There's others. There was another pie safe in that building, and it was not a Bedford Pie Safe, but I am 99.9% certain from the material it's made from the tins that it's in it, and from the construction of it and the time it was constructed and it being sitting in that building with the other one, I'm sure that the same man built it. He built it in a conventional pie safe style. It's not built in the style of the Bedford Pie Safes, but the man was a carpenter and a cabinet maker. He didn't have to build everything the same way. It's just known that he did build a lot of pie safes in a unique way. So there was another pie safe sitting there that I'd bet everything I own and give odds that the same man built it that's built the Bedford Pie Safe. And there was other furniture in there that he possibly was the builder of it, because it was 1850s, 1860s, 1870s, that era style, construction, materials, consistent with the time and with the area of handmade furniture from that time. And we've already got evidence sitting there that a guy close to that place and that time was the guy who built the Bedford Pie Safes. So I'm saying he could have built some of that other stuff too. I don't know that, and I'm not as sure of it as I am the other pie safe. I'm sure he built it. But it was just a cool experience, just something that happened, and it's one of those things that, think of all the things that had to come together for that to happen. For Sharon to walk into a place and see that and even know what she was looking at and even share that with the people that she was with. Well, this story continues from there because there's still things going on there. If the first of the houses wasn't already sold, it is now. They sold the house. The family sold the house that the Bedford Pie Safe was in, the house that the Stipp children were raised in, the house that pie safe had been sitting in for who knows how many years. They sold that house to a lady from Arizona, and so they had to get all the things out of it. And not only that, but the house next door to it, which was another of the houses that they owned and inherited through the Zong family, they wanted to sell it. So they needed to do work there as well. So Sharon has been in and out of that place, I don't know how many times, but she's helping with that project. And one day, after the house sold and they were getting it cleaned out, the one that had the pie safe in it, her and the daughter of Miss Stipp were in the house, and the daughter said to Squirrel, she said, "That old shelf paper's been in that pie safe forever, and I'd like to just get it out of there. Why don't you get that out of there, and we'll either clean up those shelves or we'll put new shelf paper in it before we move that pie safe out." So Sharon began taking the shelf paper out, and as she related it to me, underneath one of the shelf papers were 2 5x7 cards, and she thought to herself, "Oh, some old recipes," and she picked them up to look at them, and woo, be still my heart. On those cards was a typewritten message, pretty much the same message, but written, not copied, made one and then copied it. It was typewritten on a typewriter. You could tell by the spacing, and some of the words didn't end the same place, but it's the same message. And the message said, basically, this pie safe was built by John Reath, Johnreath, and he was a man who built, when he built this one, he built 3 just like it, or like it. And one of those belongs to a lady, or to a family named Roth, R-O-T-H, in Terre Haute. And then there's this one. And then there's one owned by the great-grandson, or great-great-grandson, of John Reath. His name is James Reath. And then it was signed at the bottom. It wasn't signed, but it said, by James Reath, 1976, I think. And what I think happened was in 1976, which was a sesquicentennial celebration, I think, for Lawrence County, Indiana, local people were encouraged to document things like that. And I think this man who knew of this pie safe made these cards, took it there, documented that this pie safe was built by his great-great-grandfather. And he put it with that pie safe on a shelf, and it subsequently got covered over by shelf paper and 50 years later discovered by Sharon Mosier. And of course, she took pictures of it, which I'm sure by now in this video you've seen the pictures that she sent me on the phone. And oh my goodness, I now knew the man who built, I knew what his name was, the man who built the Bedford Pie Safes. His name was John Reath. I just can't tell you how excited I got with that information. I can't tell you. This is another goosebump experience, and even more than that, I just, I had to sit down. Wow! I learned the man who had built the Bedford Pie Safes. And I had suspected that he was from that area because of some other things. Number one, my pie safe, this is 18th Street, just north of the Catholic Church, about a block and a half. My pie safe came from 17th and 8th Street. So that's 1, 2, 3 city blocks separate where the two pie safes were. This one in the Zahn district on I Street in the 1900 block, and mine at the corner of 17th and H, which is just about where you go to drive through, drop your letters off at the today's post office in Bedford, Indiana. On that corner was where my Aunt Colleen bought her pie safe at auction in the house that they were getting ready to tear down there. So I had thought, and another one of the pie safes was from the eastern part of Lawrence County, that a pie safe that I had found that I knew was a Bedford pie safe. So I thought somewhere around in there is where these pie safes come from. And it made sense too, because that was the first area of Bedford, and that was the 1850 to 1880, 1890 time frame which I would have put these pie safes. I actually thought maybe they were a little later than that. I used to think they were like 1875 or 80 up into maybe early 1900s. But after I found out about Mr. Reath, then I found out that Mr. Reath lived at 18th and H Street. So he lived between where I found the two pie safes, or where the two pie safes were found. He lived a block south of the one my Aunt Colleen bought, on the opposite corner of that block, and then he lived just a little east and north of where this pie safe was found. His name was John Reath. So I went to the Lawrence County Historical Society, and I said to the ladies there, I said, I'm looking for information about a man named John Reath. And I found some. I didn't find as much as I'd hoped to, but I found a story about this man who was a cabinet maker and was building a house in that area over around 20th and G Street or somewhere there in that neighborhood. He was building a house, and they about had the house done. Overnight, the house caught on fire and burned up, and all his carpenter tools got burned up. Found that out about him. I found out that he lived on the corner of 18th and 8th Street. And in another thing in the Lawrence County archives, I found out that his address was 1728 8th Street. So now I knew which corner he lived on. He lived on the northeast corner of 18th and 8th Street. There where now the Grace Methodist Church is. So I began to put these things together and learn things about him. Then I found out he was buried in the Green Hill Cemetery, and saw pictures of his grave. And I went over there 2 or 3 times trying to find it, and I never could catch anybody there at the office to help me. But one day, finally, my wife and I went over there, and I was determined I was going to keep looking until I found it. And I did find it, found his grave. Because I'd seen pictures of it online. I knew what the tombstone looked like, and I learned more about him. I learned some of the other people named Reath that were buried there around him. And I didn't know what relation they were to him. I learned about him, and I called James Lee Hutchison. Most of you people know him as the writer of a series of books about that area of town called Dutchtown. He calls it Dutchtown. He doesn't call it the Zahn Historic District, but Dutchtown and the Zahn Historic District are 2 very similar areas. I'd say Dutchtown is a little bigger and it probably includes most of the Zahn Historic District, but it's actually a little bigger than the Zahn Historic District. It would go from probably a little further south and a little further east, and it would include Leatherwood Creek, or the Leatherwood Creek bank on that side of Bedford, where a boy that lived in that neighborhood might journey to during his lifetime. And I thought, he knows a lot about that area, and he's an older man, and he may know something about who this is. And while I was looking for who John Reath was, I didn't know yet, I called him and I asked him. I told him about Bedford Pie Safes, and I asked him if he knew about a cabinet maker from that area. And of course he didn't know, because actually John Reath died in 1898, which was before Lee Hutchison's time. Not long before, but before. But I found out those things. I found out that John Reath was born in Germany. I found out that John Reath immigrated to the United States in, I think, early 1850s. I found out that he married a woman named Serelda, I think. Serelda Owens. And they had 11 children. So I began to find things out about him, and then I had another thought. I thought, I know a person named Reath. I know a guy named Reath Cosner, and that's an unusual name. I couldn't find anybody with the last name of Reath in the Lawrence County area anymore, but I found some reference to older Reaths, and I thought maybe Reath Cosner, sometimes that happens in a family, that being that unusual, maybe he was named after somebody on that the Reath family. And so I wanted to ask him that question and see what he knew, but I haven't ever been able to get a hold of him. He spends a lot of time in, I think he lives in Florida now, and he's not in Lawrence County anymore. He's not in Lawrence County all the time, and my attempts to reach him failed, so haven't talked to Reath. But since I did have that thought and did try to find that out, that I started pursuing that on my own, and I went back and I noticed that in Reath Cosner's father's obituary, his dad's name was Leonard Wallace, I think, Cosner. And in his obituary, it listed his parents as Louis Cosner and Mary Louise Reath Cosner. So I learned that the Cosner brothers that I knew, David and Reath, their grandmother's name, their grandmother's maiden name was Reath. And I thought, you know what, that could be. It could be that he was related to that family, and maybe they'd know. So I called uh, David. I called Vicky because I got her phone number and I don't have David's. I called Vicky and I said, I need to talk to David. She said, not here. But while I was talking to her, he came in and I asked him, and he didn't know. Not only did he know, he said he didn't care. Didn't care nothing about that. Didn't know anything about it. Didn't care anything about it. So that was unusual to me. I still don't understand that, but I didn't pursue it any further. Those of you that know David uh, know how he is about some things, and that didn't surprise me that he was like that. But I just can't understand that anybody's like that. Gave up on that pursuit, but I didn't give up totally on the whole idea of it because Reath was just too unusual a name. Well, this week I went down another rabbit hole online and I finally got to a place where I discovered that connection. I'd already found that John Reath had 11 children and a place where it listed their names. And this past week I found a place where I could go and find about their children and their families, and I got messing around enough that I finally found that David and Reath Cosner of Bedford, Indiana, that anybody that's my age and lived in Bedford all their life, they know who David and Reath Cosner are because of Cosner's gun store, Cosner's hardware store, Cosner's ice company. They know about the Cosners. So those two, their great grandfather was John Reath. He built the Bedford Pie Safes. David doesn't care. I don't know how Reath feels, but that's just an interesting little piece of information that I found. Selda Owens and John Reath had 11 children. One of them's name was Tom Reath, Thomas J. Reath. He married a woman named Basin Cobb, and they had a daughter named Mary Louise Reath, and she married Louis Cosner, and they had a son named Leonard Cosner, and he was David and Reath Cosner's father. So, for whatever that's worth, it's all very exciting to me. And I'd still like to know more about John Reath and his pie safes and his business and the nature of it and the possibility of his building other things that people would be interested in. But I own a pie safe that he built, probably in 1860 something. And I know of some others in Bedford and in the Bedford area. I owned another one myself one time. I told about it in the Bedford Pie Safe video I made. I would be interested in owning any of them that you might know of. I'd like to know what happened to the one that belonged to James Reath. He was married 3 times, and the last lady he was married to, her name was Qualkenbush. I think she was a teacher in the Bedford school system. And I suspect that when he died, she then owned that pie safe, and I don't know what happened to it from then. But I'd be interested to know what happened to it. I'd be interested to see it if that would be possible. I'd be even interested in owning it. And the Reath pie safe that went to Terre Haute, I'd like to know what happened to that one. And any other Bedford pie safes that you may know of or suspect you know of, I'd love to know that. I've rambled on and on and on here, and I think that's enough. But I wanted to share with you that I found the owner of the Bedford Pie Safes, or I found the creator of the Bedford Pie Safes, who he was, when he lived, when he died, where he's buried, who some of his relatives are, and some other information about him. I want to give a plug to the Lawrence County Museum. Boy, those people, we have a great museum in Lawrence County. If you've never been there, you need to go there and look around. And you need to go there frequently. There's just all kinds of things you can learn. And the people that work in there, they're just great folks. They'll help you with anything. They're just nice. They have a wealth of information. Some of them do. Go there and patronize that place and give them a donation. Help them keep going. That's a valuable asset that we have in Lawrence County if we like that kind of thing. I'm a Hard Times guy. You have a good day.